The ground trembled beneath my feet as the sky turned red like burning ash, and I could feel the heat of death in the air. That night still burns in my memory. The night I thought I was the hunter. I carried my spear with pride, my heart filled with rage after the creature took everything from me. I followed its tracks through the mist, every step whispering revenge. But when I reached the valley, I saw something that froze my blood. The beast stood there, massive and breathing like a storm, yet its eyes weren't wild. They were sorrowful, almost human. In that moment I realized the truth I wasn't ready to face. I wasn't the one hunting a monster. I was stepping into its world, disturbing something sacred. The hunter in me died that night, and something darker took its place. A truth too heavy for any man to carry. My name is Kale, the last survivor of the Fire Valley tribe, and I come from a time when the earth was still young and wild. 4 million years ago, the world was a place of fire and shadow, where mountains breathed smoke and the sky bled red every evening. Giant trees touched the clouds and beasts roamed freely, their roars shaking the ground. We lived hidden among the rocks, hunted by creatures older than nightmares. My tribe believed the monsters were gods, punishers of men, but I never believed in gods. I believed in survival. Every day was a war between hunger and fear, between man and nature always won. I was born into a world that demanded blood, but I never knew whose blood it would take next. Until the day I saw the creature that changed everything, the beast that took my family and turned my soul into fire. The smoke of our burning camp was still alive in my eyes when I walked toward the river, my heart heavy, but my mind colder than the stones beneath my feet. The jungle around me breathed like a living thing, every branch whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I followed the trail of broken trees and crushed bones until the air grew still, and the sound of the river faded into silence. The mist was thick, rolling across the ground like white fire, and somewhere within it, something moved. I gripped my spear tighter, my fingers trembling, though I tried to steady them. The world felt smaller in that moment, as if time itself had stopped to watch what would happen next. Then I saw it, massive, black as the void, its scales glistening with drops of water that looked like molten silver. Its eyes cut through the fog, glowing gold, ancient and full of memory, like it had seen 1,000 worlds rise and fall. It stood there, not roaring, not charging, only watching me, as if it remembered my face. I wanted to move, to run, but my body refused. I had faced hunger, storms, and death itself, but this was something else. It wasn't just an animal. It was something sacred, something cursed. When it finally took a step forward, the ground shook beneath me. Every instinct screamed to fight, but deep inside I felt something strange. A pull, a connection, as if my blood knew its rhythm. My spear felt useless against its power, and yet I lifted it anyway because that was all I knew. The creature lowered its head, its breath hot and heavy, the sound mixing with the distant thunder. Then, without warning, it roared, a sound so deep it tore through the air and through my bones. Birds scattered, the trees bent, and I fell to my knees, my ears ringing. When I looked up, it was gone, swallowed by the mist like a shadow retreating into the past. I thought it was over, but that roar stayed in my head, echoing like a promise. That night I couldn't sleep. The fire flickered beside me, but its warmth didn't reach my heart. I kept seeing those eyes, bright and alive, burning through the darkness of my mind. I told myself it was fear, but deep down I knew it was something more. The creature had looked at me the way a man looks at his reflection, not his prey. Days passed, and I returned to the same river again and again, each time hoping to see it, though I didn't understand why. The jungle began to change. The air grew colder, the birds fell silent, and the water turned dark with ash from the distant volcano. It felt like the world was waiting for something, like nature itself was holding its breath. Then one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I found the marks, huge claw prints pressed deep into the earth, leading toward the cliffs beyond the river. They were fresh. My heart began to pound, not with fear, but with a strange, burning purpose. I followed them without thinking, every step taking me further from safety and closer to something I couldn't name. The trail led me to an open valley where the wind screamed between the rocks, and the sky was painted with lightning. The creature stood at the far edge, half in shadow, half in firelight, watching me again. It didn't move, and neither did I. The distance between us felt like a lifetime, but in that moment, I understood. It wasn't chance that brought us together. It was destiny, something written long before I was born. The rain began to fall, and the creature lifted its head, releasing a deep, sorrowful sound that felt like grief, not rage. I lowered my spear, not in surrender, but in respect, because for the first time I saw the truth behind the monster's eyes. It wasn't a killer without reason. It was protecting something precious. I didn't know what, but I knew my path was no longer about vengeance. It was about understanding what bound me to this creature, why it had spared me when it could have ended me in an instant. The storm grew wilder, the wind howled, and before I could take another step, lightning struck between us, blinding the world in white light. When I opened my eyes, the beast was gone, and only the sound of its echo remained, fading into the mountains. That night I made a promise to myself. I would find it again, not to kill it, but to uncover the truth buried beneath its roar. Something deep inside me whispered that my story and the creature's were the same, and the real danger was not in facing the monster, but in discovering what it wanted me to remember. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was worse than thunder, and I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest as I returned to what was left of my home. The forest smelled of rain and fear, the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. My tribe was rebuilding the shelters, our fires barely burning, and even though the night was calm, every sound made us flinch. I could feel its presence in the air, a strange heaviness that told me it was not over. My brother Rin sat beside me sharpening his blade, his eyes distant but burning with anger. He told me to forget what I saw, to stay close, to wait for the next sunrise before hunting again. I nodded, but inside I already knew the sunrise would never come for us. That night, when the moon hid behind the clouds, the ground trembled again. At first it was a whisper under the soil, then a violent shudder that split the earth beneath our feet. The screams began before the flames. Our fire pits burst like explosions, sparks flying into the dark as something massive moved through the jungle. I saw trees falling, shadows twisting, and then it emerged, the same creature, larger, darker, more furious than before. Its roar broke through the storm clouds, a sound that tore through my soul. People ran in every direction, but nowhere was safe. I saw Rin standing his ground, spear in hand, shouting for everyone to move, his voice swallowed by the chaos. The beast swung its tail, crushing the shelters like they were made of leaves, and the fire spread through the camp, painting the night in red and orange. I ran toward Rin, but before I could reach him, the creature's claw came down and everything slowed. The light, the heat, the screams, they all blurred into a single moment of silence. When I opened my eyes, the air was thick with smoke, the smell of ash and blood heavy around me. I called his name again and again, but there was no answer. All I could see was the fire eating away at what used to be our home. I fell to my knees, helpless, watching the creature disappear into the night, its massive form fading behind the flames like a ghost of the earth itself. My body trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that broke inside me that could never be fixed. My brother's blade lay near the ashes, glowing faintly from the fire's reflection. I picked it up and pressed it to my chest, whispering a promise that I didn't fully understand. I would not rest. I would not stop until that creature fell. The rain began to pour again, cold and merciless, washing the blood from my hands but not the hatred from my heart. I walked through the ruins, stepping over the remains of everything I had ever known, and with each step, the sound of the rain became the sound of my heartbeat. I knew that somewhere out there the creature was watching, waiting, maybe even regretting what it had done, but none of that mattered. To me, it was no longer a guardian, no longer a mystery. It was the monster that took my brother, and I would find it no matter how far I had to go. The jungle around me was silent now, as if even nature mourned with me, and I could feel the weight of destiny closing in. I didn't know where the creature had gone, but I knew it would return. Monsters always do. I stood at the edge of the valley, the broken sky above me flickering with lightning, and I swore that the next time I saw those golden eyes, I would be ready. Revenge wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only thing keeping me alive. And as the thunder rolled across the mountains, I whispered into the storm that I was coming for it, no matter what waited on the other side. The creature had taken my world, my blood, and my peace, but it had also given me something else, a reason to become the very thing I once feared. The storm had barely ended when I began my journey. leaving behind the ashes of my tribe and the silence that haunted every corner of the valley. The ground was still wet with the memory of fire, and each step I took carried the weight of every scream that still echoed in my mind. I had no map, no companion, only the blade that once belonged to my brother, and the trail of destruction left behind by the creature. The jungle was alive, but it no longer felt like home. It was a labyrinth of shadows whispering my name. I followed the broken trees. The claw marks burned into the earth, and the strange footprints that led deeper into the unknown. The air grew colder as I climbed the mountain ridge, and the sky darkened like the world itself wanted to hide what I was about to see. Days passed without food or rest, and my body began to fail, but my rage carried me forward. At night, I could hear the creature's roar rolling through the valleys, distant but alive, as if mocking me from somewhere beyond the fog. I crossed swamps where the water reflected the moon like a silver eye. I climbed cliffs where the wind screamed loud enough to drown my thoughts. And through it all, I felt its presence ahead of me, waiting, leading me somewhere I couldn't understand. One night, while resting beneath a twisted tree, I found something carved into the stone beside me, symbols, deep and ancient, almost glowing under the pale light. They were unlike any markings I had ever seen, shapes that spoke of battles long before my time. The carvings showed men standing before a creature with wings of fire, the same shape, the same glowing eyes. It wasn't the first time this monster had walked the earth. I realized then that my enemy had been here for ages, that others had fought it, and all had failed. The thought didn't break me, it strengthened me. If they fell, I would not. I pressed my hand against the cold stone, feeling the grooves beneath my fingers, and for a moment I felt warmth, like the rock itself was alive. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound, a growl, deep and distant. I followed it. The path led through a narrow canyon where the walls rose like giant teeth, and the air was thick with mist and fear. The ground was littered with bones, not human, not animal, but something in between. My heart pounded and my breath grew short, yet I didn't stop. The deeper I went, the more I felt something changing inside me. My anger began to mix with something else, something I couldn't name. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't hate either. It was understanding, the kind that burns and heals at the same time. As I walked, the night sky opened, revealing 1,000 stars that flickered like silent watchers. I felt small beneath them, smaller than ever, and for a moment I wondered if I was chasing the creature or if it was guiding me to something far greater. The land grew stranger the further I went. The ground pulsed faintly beneath my feet, as if the heart of the world was beating below the surface. Rivers of molten rock cut through the darkness, glowing like veins of fire, and the air hummed with a low vibration that made my skin crawl. I followed it until I reached a plateau overlooking a vast valley filled with mist. There, in the distance, I saw shapes moving, enormous figures carved in stone. Statues of men holding weapons pointed toward the sky, half buried in the earth. They were old, older than memory, their eyes hollow but full of warning. I walked among them, feeling the air grow heavy with an ancient sorrow. Each step forward felt like walking through the dreams of the dead. And then, in the center of that place, I found a mark burned into the ground, a spiral of ash, still warm. I knelt beside it, my heart trembling, because I knew what it meant. The creature had been here, and it was close. I could feel its presence crawling over my skin, its breath whispering through the wind. I gripped my brother's blade and looked into the darkness ahead, knowing the next step would change everything. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was hunting the monster or becoming one. The line between us had started to fade, and deep inside, a voice whispered that my revenge was no longer about justice. It was about destiny. The mist hung heavy in the valley like a living curtain, and as I stepped forward, the ground beneath my feet felt older than time itself, cracked and hollow, carrying whispers of long-forgotten battles. Bones jutted out of the earth at odd angles, some shattered, some whole, twisted like sculptures made by a god angry at the world. I walked among them carefully, my eyes tracing each mark, each groove in the stone that told a story I could barely comprehend. The air was thick with the scent of decay, dust, and something metallic that made my stomach turn, but I didn't stop. I had followed the creature here, through mountains, swamps, and storms, and now the truth was close, pressing against my chest like a fist I couldn't escape. Then I saw it, a circle of massive fossils, some shaped like enormous claws, some like ribs of beasts I had never imagined. At the center, a hollow carved deep into the ground, almost like a nest, but enormous, older than my mind could hold. I crouched at the edge and peered inside, my breath catching as the cold wind whispered across my skin. This was no battlefield. It was a sanctuary, a sacred place, and I realized with a jolt that the creature hadn't hunted or killed recklessly. Every strike, every roar, every flash of claws had been defending this place. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in the hollow chamber below. I had been wrong. It wasn't a monster seeking destruction. It was a guardian, older than memory, and everything I had thought about revenge and hate twisted in my chest. I touched the earth lightly, feeling the hum beneath my fingers, a vibration like a pulse, a heartbeat older than any human life. I knew then that the creature's eyes, its golden glow, weren't just wild. They were watching, calculating, protecting something far beyond my understanding. I descended cautiously, every step a question, every breath a confession. In the shadows, I saw bones that weren't human but shaped like them, fossilized figures frozen mid-struggle, telling a story of men and monsters who had come here before and failed. The thought made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. I had been walking a path already walked by those who underestimated the world and the creatures that protected it. At the center of the hollow, I saw the earth rise slightly, a mound that pulsed faintly, and as I stepped closer, the wind swirled around me like it had its own voice. It whispered secrets I couldn't fully grasp, showing glimpses of battles, of fire and claw, of men who had tried to take what wasn't theirs. My fingers brushed the earth and I felt the warmth beneath, alive, almost breathing. Then I understood. The creature had been guarding a life, something buried deep beneath the earth, something worth every claw, every roar, every tear that had been shed in fear or pain. My knees went weak and I sank to the ground, realizing that the line I had drawn between hunter and monster didn't exist here. I had been chasing anger and revenge, blind to the truth that the world was bigger than my pain, older than my family, and far more complex than my fear. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the faintest sound of scales brushing stone, and I froze, knowing it watched me from above, judging, deciding if I was worthy of this secret. I took a deep breath, letting my anger settle, replaced by awe and something heavier, something that trembled in my chest like the earth itself. The bones, the fossils, the hollowed earth, they weren't just remnants of death. They were lessons, warnings, and proof that some forces in this world were not meant to be conquered, only understood. My hand rested on my brother's blade at my side, and I realized that I could not leave without understanding what it protected. It wasn't treasure, it wasn't power, it was life itself, fragile and hidden beneath the soil, guarded by a creature older than any memory we carried. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to flee from what I did not understand, but I knew that running now would be betrayal, not only to the truth, but to the bond that fate had forced between me and this guardian. The valley seemed to breathe around me, each gust of wind, each echo, each faint shimmer of movement in the shadows reaffirming what I already knew. The creature was not my enemy. It was the protector of something sacred, and if I wished to confront it again, I would have to see the world through its eyes, to understand before I could act. The realization twisted in my chest like fire and ice, and I knew the journey ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand that I question everything I had ever believed, everything I had ever wanted, and everything I had ever hated. The guardian waited, its presence felt even without sight, and I realized that the path I thought was about vengeance had become something far more dangerous and far more necessary: the truth. The wind howled around me as I reached the edge of the burning crater, the heat scorching my skin and smoke curling into my lungs. But I did not falter. The creature stood at the center, massive and terrifying, its scales glinting in the firelight, eyes like molten gold fixed on me, as if it knew every thought that raced through my mind. My hand trembled slightly as I gripped my spear, but this time I did not hesitate. Fear was no longer enough to make me run. The fire I carried flared against the darkness, casting long shadows that danced across jagged rocks, and the scent of smoke mixed with the metallic tang of blood still warm from past battles. The creature roared, a sound that shook the ground beneath me and made the stones vibrate under my feet, but I stood firm, my heartbeat echoing louder than the world around me. It leapt forward with the speed of a storm, claws flashing, and I swung my spear with every ounce of strength I had, the tip striking against scales that were harder than any stone I had ever touched. Sparks flew, and the air itself seemed to catch fire as we clashed again and again, the valley trembling with the fury of our struggle. I dodged a swipe of its tail, barely keeping my balance on the edge of the crater, and I lunged, plunging the spear into its side, feeling a vibration travel up my arm as the beast let out a cry that split the air. The ground shook with every movement, fire bursting from the crater in molten jets, and I realized how close we were to consuming ourselves along with the earth. Its eyes met mine again, and in them I saw not hatred, not anger, but an ancient sorrow, a memory of battles lost and lives protected, and for a moment, the rage that had driven me for so long faltered. The creature swiped again, catching my shoulder, pain lancing through me, but I did not fall. I stood, staggering back only slightly, and pressed the spear deeper, fire in my hand, fury in my heart. Claws, fire, thunder, and stone collided, and I could hear the valley itself screaming, echoing our struggle across mountains and rivers that seemed to vanish in the heat. My muscles burned, my lungs fought for air, and the world narrowed to the flash of golden eyes and the rhythm of our battle. I struck again and again, every movement precise, every breath calculated, until finally the creature collapsed, its massive body hitting the scorched earth with a force that rattled the bones of the valley. My chest heaved, sweat and blood streaked across my face, my vision blurred from exhaustion, but I stepped closer, certain it was over. I lifted my spear, ready to end what I had chased for so long, my heart pounding with the finality of vengeance and triumph. But as I stared into its eyes one last time, they opened slowly, and I saw something that made the world tilt on its axis. There was no malice there, no cruelty, only a plea, a silent warning that cut deeper than any claw could reach. My hand trembled, the spear wavering in my grip, and I felt the weight of everything I had done, everything I had thought I knew, crash down upon me. The fire of my anger collided with the fire of truth, and I realized in that instant that killing it would destroy more than the monster before me. It would destroy the very balance of what it had protected all these millennia. The roar that had once signaled death now seemed almost like a cry for understanding, echoing through the crater, through the valley, through every scar in the earth that had been written by its claws. I lowered my spear slowly, each inch an eternity, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath my feet and the life that still lingered in the creature before me. Its chest heaved, scales glinting in the dying light, and in its eyes I saw a world I had never been part of, a purpose I had never considered, a history older than vengeance. The fire around us crackled, the smoke curling like fingers across the valley, and I understood that the real battle had never been with the creature. It had been with my own blindness, my own rage, the years of grief and anger that had driven me to this place. I fell to my knees, exhausted, burned, but awake, alive in a way I had never known, and I whispered into the wind, not words of hate but of acknowledgement, of understanding that this guardian was not my enemy. The storm of battle quieted, leaving only the sound of my ragged breathing and the faint echo of its eyes still watching me, golden and wise, and I knew that the next step in my journey would not be about destruction, but about learning what it had always tried to teach, about seeing the world not as a hunter seeking revenge, but as a witness to the force that had endured beyond all time. The fire died down slowly, leaving shadows that moved like ghosts, and as I sat there trembling, I realized that this confrontation had changed everything. The creature was not my prey, and my path forward would demand courage beyond anger, patience beyond fear, and a heart capable of holding the truth without breaking. I stood trembling over the creature's still body, the echoes of our battle fading into a heavy silence that pressed against my chest, like the weight of the world itself. My hands still clutching the bloodied spear as the heat of the crater burned into my skin and sweat ran down my face, mixing with ash and dirt, and then the ground beneath me shuddered violently, a deep, trembling roar passing through the earth, splitting the soil open like it had been holding a secret for eternity, and from the fissure rose something enormous, smooth, and glowing faintly, with the same golden light that had burned in the creature's eyes. A single egg so large that it seemed almost impossible for anything to have come from it, and I stumbled back, my mind reeling, my heart hammering, as understanding struck me like a bolt of fire through my chest, and suddenly every moment of fear, Anger and rage I had carried on this journey collapsed into a single truth, that the creature had never been my enemy, that every claw, every roar, every strike had been a defense, a warning, a protection of life far more fragile and precious than I had ever realized. And I saw then with a clarity that burned hotter than any fire that had ever seared me that I had become the real destroyer, the one who had intruded into a sacred space, whose hands had dealt harm where none was deserved, whose desire for revenge had blinded me to the truth that life itself had been at stake. And I sank to my knees, my head spinning, staring at the enormous egg as the golden glow pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat beneath the cracked surface, and I could feel the warmth radiating from it, a life waiting to emerge, a legacy that the creature had devoted centuries of vigilance to protect. And the weight of my actions pressed down harder than any mountain, heavier than any weapon I had ever wielded, guilt and awe mixing into a storm that left me gasping for breath, my vision swimming with images of what could have been, of the destruction I had caused, of the family I had lost, and of the innocence I had almost stolen. And I pressed a trembling hand against the earth near the egg, feeling the vibrations, the subtle thrum of life beneath my fingers, realizing that the creature had trusted me, or at least given me a choice in some unspoken way, to step back or to step further into the role of destroyer. And I knew that the moment I had been waiting for, the confrontation I had trained for my whole life, had revealed itself not as a triumph, not as victory, but as a moral reckoning, a lesson in humility and responsibility, and I could hear in my mind the echoes of its roar transforming into something softer, a warning, a plea, a reminder that life, even in its most terrifying forms, deserved protection, not vengeance, and the smoke of the crater swirled around me like spirits circling, carrying the scent of fire and ash and the distant memory of battles long before I was born, and I realized that I was holding not just a weapon, but a choice, the power to destroy further or to step back and honor the life that had survived despite all odds, and my hands shook as I lowered the spear slowly, feeling every inch of its weight as a symbol of both death and redemption, and the glow of the egg reflected in my eyes, burning into my mind the truth that what I had thought was a monster was a parent, a guardian, and that I had been the intruder, the one who had almost ended a legacy, almost destroyed a life that depended on centuries of vigilance. And in that moment, I vowed silently to protect the egg, to ensure the creature's sacrifice had not been in vain, to walk away from the path of vengeance that had led me here, and to carry the memory of the guardian not as a trophy but as a teacher, as a reminder, that sometimes the line between hunter and protector is drawn not in anger but in understanding. And the valley seemed to exhale around me, the ground settling, the glow of the egg pulsing with life. And I rose slowly, every movement heavy with remorse and resolve, knowing that the story had changed, that the journey had changed, that I had changed. And as I turned from the crater, leaving the guardian and its unborn child in the silence of the ancient valley, I felt the weight of eternity on my shoulders, the responsibility of survival and protection, and the knowledge that true strength is not in defeating the feared, but in understanding what is worth defending. And with each step I carried the glow of that egg in my heart, a light to guide me beyond the shadows of my own fury, beyond the echoes of revenge, into a world where the real monsters are often those within ourselves, and where redemption is found not in the fall of the enemy, but in the protection of the innocent. And as I walked away, the wind carried a whisper through the valley, gentle yet powerful, as if the earth itself was forgiving me. And I knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would define not only who I was, but what I would become, a witness to life, a guardian in my own way, forever changed by the twist that revealed the truth hidden in golden eyes and molten scales. And I stepped forward, leaving behind the destruction I had caused, carrying the promise of new life and the lesson that sometimes the hunter is the one who must learn to protect. I buried the creature deep beneath the earth, covering its massive body with soil and stones. And as I placed the glowing egg carefully in my arms, a heavy silence fell over the jungle, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Every step I took away from the crater felt like leaving behind a part of myself, the weight of the journey pressing on my chest. Yet I carried the egg with reverence, knowing it held the future of a life far older and wiser than my own. The shadows of the forest seemed to watch me, the eyes of unseen creatures following my path. And deep inside I understood that the cycle of life and guardianship would continue long after I was gone. One day the egg would hatch, and a new chapter would begin, a story of power, fear, and survival that would demand courage, wisdom, and respect. And when that time came, someone would witness it, someone would remember. And the line between hunter and monster would blur once more, leaving behind a lesson I would carry forever. That true strength lies in protection, not destruction, and vengeance must bow to understanding.